Welcome to this evening's special event, Black History Lives Here, the legacy of social change. From all of us here at Walden University, we thank you for taking the time out of your day to join us. Please note that this webinar will be archived, so you'll have an opportunity to view the presentation again. If you need accommodations to attend this webinar, please contact disability@mail.waldenu.edu. On the screen in front of you, you'll see the main presentation, a group chat, and a section for submitting questions. These windows, as well as other items of interest, can be opened and closed at your convenience using the toolbar at the bottom of your screen. You can size these windows as you see fit, so feel free to set them to your comfort level as we move along. To submit questions, please use the Q&A window. The chat window is a place for you to communicate with other attendees. And now, please welcome our Chief of Staff and Director of Walden University's Center for Social Change, Isaac Cudjoe.
Hey everyone, welcome to the final conversation of Black History Lives Here, where I'm getting an opportunity to sit down with Dr. Monell and Dr. Francis, two amazing alumni that I've had the opportunity to either speak with or meet in person to discuss the legacy of social change in the Black community and really how it connects to Walden and beyond. So I really want to start out by getting a chance to give people this definition of who you are.
Yeah, so people define me as a mover and shaker. So I am the type of person that sees an issue or problem in the community and comes running to the table with a solution to solve it. I do a lot in the area of criminal justice reform. I am also heavily involved in politics in my community because I know that some decisions or solutions need to have a political answer. So I'm the first person in line to volunteer to help communities just improve and just build better places to work and live and thrive.
Similar to my colleague in arms, that is, Jack Monell, most consider me a jack of all trades, pardon the pun, right? So I do wear many hats, particularly as it relates to social justice and activism. You know, first and foremost, I'm a family man. That's my foundation. For me, I gain my inspiration from what my family provides me and motivation in reference to that. If we've learned anything this past year as it relates to politics or criminal justice reform or marginalized communities, is that there are clearly separate systems and separate rules for separate groups. And for me, my life's story has been to balance those scales of justice in all facets, not just criminal justice, education, healthcare, poverty. It's holistic in nature, and it has so many different layers. So, you know, that's a bit about me. I'm excited to engage with both Crystal and Isaac this evening, and I'm excited to see the great work that we both, Crystal and I, have been afforded indirectly related to Walden and our studies here.
I'm really excited for this conversation, and I can't stress enough that I want this to be a conversation. I want y'all to push back. I want us to feel like we are in person, in each other's spaces, discussing something very real and personal to us. And when I think about social change, and I think about Walden, where we are, my parents always taught me, wherever you go eat, remember the people that set the table, right? Remember the people that set the table, not just the food, but who set the table. And here we are, an opportunity where Walden has afforded us and set this table for us to have this conversation. And Jack, one time we were speaking and you said something to me. You said something about Walden and social change and how we were talking about it before it became cool. And I wanted to know if you could just share a little bit more about what you meant by that.
The buzzword is social justice, clearly. It's very chic. It's very popular in all sectors, not just in the academy or institutions, but in organizations, both, you know, nonprofits, local, state government, or federal government, that is. So for me, I remember years ago, I can't recall the moment, it might have been one of the alumni magazines. And it just it had said, it talked about social change agents. And, you know, I'm also a social worker by training, but, and, you know, you talk about that a little bit, but I remember it being more pronounced in kind of my exposure to Walden, you know, and then fast forward, you know, maybe 5 years, 10 years later, and all you hear everywhere is social justice. And I think that's kind of interesting and unique. Notwithstanding the efforts of other institutions or organizations, clearly people were definitely engaged in some sort of social change or social activism. But it just seems to me, or at least in my experiences, it felt like, okay, this is pretty cool because now everyone is talking about it. And I feel like we were one of the first institutions, at least early on, talking about it.
In my new role at Walden as the director of the Center for Social Change, I don't just want to talk about it. I want to be about it, right? And I think as Black folk on this call, we know a lot of people that have talked about it, and very few people who back it up. And I'm curious, Crystal, for you, you know, we met, I think maybe a year ago, right around this time, about a year ago. And we were having a conversation about just your experience from your community and also this bridge of academia, right? And I think I walked away from our conversation reminding myself about the integrity it takes to remember where you come from when everything in the academic space is telling you about where you need to go, where you need to be, who you need to speak to, who you need to network with. It takes a lot of integrity to remember where you're from during all of that. And so I wanted to know how, honestly, like how you balance that.
Yeah, that's so important. So just to talk a little bit about how that idea came to mind. My grandfather is a World War II veteran. He worked in the steel mill out here in Baltimore County way back when. And he always would say, no matter how far you go, no matter what you become, never forget where you came from. And so for me, that resonated even further because both of my parents were United States Army veterans, and they were always reaching back to give back to the community. So when I grew up, earlier we talked about where we were from. I didn't live in the best neighborhood, and I saw how poverty was criminalized in the Black community. I saw, I grew up in an area where, a lot of people, their parents had to work more than one job. Maybe the children weren't supervised, so they got in trouble, or they relied to, the elements of their community to, just take them on a different path. And so I always told myself, I want to put myself in a position to, live in a better place and be able to educate myself and come back to change the systems and the processes that continue to, criminalize poverty. We talk about structural racism, which is literally, in layman terms, access to ... And so I had the outlet in the support systems, although I was raised in an area or in a community where I could have become a statistic, and I'm going to use air quotes there. And, I used my education to help pull my family up. I'm a first generation college student, and I didn't just go for the bachelor's degree. I got the master's and the PhD just to seal the deal. And so through education, I was able to, put myself in a totally different tax bracket than my family had never seen before. But it was the access to the education, and so when we talk about, what people expect once you get to a certain level, I'm always of the mind, because I've had an opportunity to participate in something called Road Trip Nation. And for those of you who don't know, it was a document. I got to travel all around the country and interview leaders who have reached like the epitome of success in their field that had a PhD. And I would ask them, it's always someone expecting of you. And the takeaway that I had was to build your own road in life, define your own road in life. You don't necessarily have to go in the footsteps of what is expected. You define your own road based on the impact and the legacy that you want to leave. So that's always stuck with me. But no matter how high you go up that ladder, you couldn't have got there on your own. Somebody helped you get there. And don't forget to reach back and pull somebody else up along the way. And for me, that's going back to the community where I was raised. That's going back to the areas where I'm seeing where struggle is taking place, and being able to take all this knowledge and education to help people understand literally how to do better, and not necessarily get out, but no, go back and recreate and build that community that you came from to become a stronger ecosystem to raise more leaders. So that's my spin on it.
You know, Isaac, to Crystal's point, and she stated it so well. You know, when you look at kind of our educational pursuits, right? Because all of this is a manifestation of us being able to acquire these degrees to help us amplify our activism, right? And our lived experiences are critical in that. That's the motivation. You know, you talk about some like to talk about it, but then some be about it, so to speak. And what you find, you know, we are fortunate to be able to do it. Now, quite frankly, everyone isn't always operating, you know, on the same plane that way. And I'm not knocking anyone who, for what, you know, they pursue degrees for whatever reason, or they pursue positions for whatever reason. But, you know, definitely similar to Crystal, for me, it was important. It was important to ensure that I'm in a position, undeniably in a position where I can impact others. And for me, and my tenure, so to speak, at Walden and some of, you know, my other educational preparation was critical in reaching back. And I think sometimes what we see in our society, you know, we're keeping it pretty frank, is that many are fortunate to achieve certain levels of success, but they do forget. They do. I've seen it, you know, I've seen it in all places where you have, you know, prominent Black folks, doing very well for themselves, but then they forget, you know. And I think for me, my humility comes from where I come from, you know, and I think that has been my motivation, because it doesn't always get easy. It's not always easy to inspire others to change, right? Social change ain't easy. It's not for the faint of heart. And sometimes you compromise things. I always say this: either it's your family, it's your career, it's your friends, something. So you give up something at some period in time. If you look at, you know, Dr. King, if you look at Malcolm X, if you look at, you know, James Baldwin, if you look at all of these prolific leaders in our history, they sacrificed, they paid the ultimate sacrifice, particularly Dr. King and Malcolm X, as it pertained to activism and speaking out against what you thought was right for our community. And sometimes, you know, we don't oftentimes see that today, that level of commitment.
You know, I was fortunate enough in college to go to Baltimore, learn about, just because the friends that I had, the community that I had, and go into the communities, go to Our Daily Bread and stand in front of Our Daily Bread in Baltimore and look how there's a high school across, right? At that time, there was a high school across, and there was a correctional facility of some sort next door. So you got a soup kitchen, a school, and then you got a correctional facility in a triangle. And I thought about the fact that, well, I don't need these people to live in my zip code. I don't need these people to be my neighbors in order for me to understand that I need to love them. And that broadened my perspective of where social change should go, right? But there was something that I needed to understand, and that was in serving others and thinking of them as family. I started thinking about, am I fighting the system, or am I curing the cold? Like the cold, you can stop get a cough drop and suppress a cough, but if that virus is still in you, if I'm not fighting that virus, what am I actually doing? And so I was curious from the both of you, how did you come to understand the definition of social change? Because you both seem to be applying it in different ways, but how did you define, what defined that for you? Because for me, it was learning to redefine what home meant and learning to redefine what service actually meant?
Well, for me, Isaac, and I'm gonna attack it both two ways. The more important, the first point I want to make is that just understanding the humanistic side of it, right? To your point, like, yeah, we want to help people, but sometimes we circumvent the humanistic side. We try to fix, and I love your virus kind of, metaphor. We try to fix the problem and sometimes throw money on the problem, which can help, of course, but it's not necessarily always a long-term fix. I like to use I say this all the time, we put Band-Aids on wounds that need some real sutures, So for me, it's always important to know your audience, right? If we're speaking in that context, know who you're trying to serve and get to know them intimately so that you can appreciate what those circumstances, what led them to their current environment. We see it, Crystal and I, we both kind of work in criminal justice environments too. And we've seen it, you get a file on somebody, you get a sheet on somebody, and you already pass judgment on them. You already, you without even seeing a person, you look at a picture, you look at the write-up, and you already formed impressions, but you don't know what led, you don't know the whys. One of my earlier books, I wrote about kind of why with a question mark. Like, we're so quick to judge. We're so quick to judge, jury, and executioner without understanding the root causes of what these disadvantages, what these issues are faced in various communities like ours. So that for me, that's important. My folks immigrated in the 50s. And I speak another language, I'm bilingual. And, I always make this joke because it's funny. Maybe not to y'all, but it's funny. But it's like, I grew up in Brooklyn, New York during the 70s and 80s. My first name is Jack. My folks are from the Caribbean. I speak Spanish. We're from Puerto Rico and other places throughout the Caribbean. And it's like, I was an oddball. And I spoke very, very well. I just spoke correct English. It's not even well. But in my neighborhood at that time, the perception was that, who's this dude? Oh, he must be a white guy because his name is Jack and he don't speak like us. And I just felt out of place, man. And I think a lot of that influenced me early on, and where I was super smart, I didn't have anybody really powerful enough to encourage me. Yo, you belong here. Don't trip off them fools because they probably going to be stuck in that space. So it's like, for me, it took me a long time through a lot of blood, sweat, and tears to appreciate the gifts I was given in the sense of education and the support I was given by those who motivated me and encouraged me to find my home. And I would finish on this, and I'm gonna let Crystal definitely go, is that what I live by now and what I tell anybody I speak to, whether it's a student or it's a community member, whomever, I say, you belong in that space. You claim it. So any room I go into, I belong. I don't care who. It could be the president of the United States. If I'm in that room, I belong. Because for many years, for many generations, we were so beaten down physically, psychologically, that we felt like we didn't belong in those spaces. And that was a lot of how our activism was basically suppressed and blocked. And I'll pause for a second. Yeah, Crystal, my bad.
No, you're good. You're good. And both of y'all said some really important descriptors that I would have used. But to the first question about what is social change really, my definition is this: it's addressing the root cause of a problem, but also bringing the individuals who are closest to the problem to help address the solution. Because oftentimes when you talk about social change and improvement, there are the people that have the knowledge, but they don't have the lived experience, that want to come tell, this is the answer, this is the solution. But people don't understand that the people who are closest to that problem understand what they need and what they desire and what they want to help improve, to help see the solution or change the outcome in the way that they would envision it. And so when I look at social change, it's more than just bringing the academics and the researchers and the public policy folks to the table. It's bringing the individuals who are closest to the problem to the table as well, because, I use that, what is it, a biblical scenario. You can give a person a fish and they'll eat for a day, but if you teach them how to fish, he'll eat for a lifetime. That's right. And so when we talk about, getting behind social change, it's more than just throwing your resources and providing the funding and writing the policy. It's providing an opportunity and a seat at the table for that individual who might otherwise think that they don't belong in the room to come educate those who are at the table that have the power and the platform to make the change on the direction of the solution. And so I think when we talk about social change, we have to start embedding that into the process, that people who have the lived experience are the most resourceful.
Absolutely.
Because they can tell you how did I get in this situation and what would keep me out of this situation. If you walk around my community in my neighborhood and you ask people, they probably can tell you who Crystal Francis is, because I take my job very, very seriously, and I feel obligated because this is my home. I want to make sure that, and I'm not just talking about my neighborhood. I'm not just talking about my community. I'm talking about my entire state, because it's home. So if something isn't working well for my neighbor across the street and it's working well for me over here, I'm going to ask the question, why? And try to find that solution. So I really believe, I just want to hit the nail on the head with that social change piece, because we have to stop telling the community what they want and give them a platform and a voice to kind of do a 360 and allow them to tell you what they need. So that's how I envision social change.
You said something, that old adage of teach a man to fish, right? For the longest time, I lived by that. I love that. And then I think the missing piece for academia, and we all navigate in the academia space. I think academia forgets that you can teach someone to fish, but if there's pollution in that water, that fish will be dirty. If that fish is dirty, the person will get sick. And so sometimes the tools that you're giving someone, if you fail to be on the other end fighting to alleviate the problem down the line, you're teaching me outdated solutions. You're teaching me to fish, but the irrigation here is bad. You're teaching me to fish, but someone is hoarding the fish up top of the stream. And that was one of my biggest challenges when and Crystal, when we met about a year ago, I told you, I said, I want to do this PhD in public policy, but I sit in these classrooms and I feel like I'm being taught to code things when I really want to decode things for my community. What encouragement can you give me as someone who wants to be a decoder, but it feels like academia is teaching me how to code?
I totally understand where you're coming from there. And there's a system and process set up so that your material will be scholarly, but I look at the dissemination piece, because that's where, you may have to do what you have to do to get across the finish line, but you own that product.
And Jack,
yeah, brother.
Before you hop in, I think Crystal's answered it from a specific lens. And for you, I really want to ask, what advice do you have for professors for activating their students while they're still learning?
So I always like to preface these kind of questions with, I am different. So let me just say that. I am somewhat of an anomaly with so many of my peers. And I say that because, I grew up in these marginalized communities. I grew up in these disadvantaged communities. I was on public assistance. I was incarcerated as a juvenile. So my lived experiences gives me a different lens when it comes down to instruction and pedagogy, right? So for me, that's number one. Number two is, as I said previously, I'm a social worker. So in social work, one of the basic foundational principles it's so simple. Meet your clients where they're at and don't be biased. Now, we have people who do that there too. But for me, it was something that was so so simple but profound. Like, how do I inspire or motivate others to get out of their circumstances? For those when I worked in the field. For my students, how do I inspire and motivate my students to be social change agents on undergraduate, graduate, and doctoral levels? Because I've taught all three. And for me, it's professors should, if they're not challenging their students to go out there and engage with the community, and we're talking about public policy now, if you're not engaged with local legislators, if you're not engaged with local activists, if you're not engaged with community leaders and or just Joe citizen who might be a little hesitant or resistant to marching or protesting or writing a flyer because maybe they're concerned about their well-being or backlash, then for me, you're wasting the students' time and money. And that's a harsh pill. And that doesn't favor well for a lot of folks. But the reality of it is, technical wise, we call this like high impact practices. And that's something kind of I specialize in. Because my students know when they come into my class, they're going to learn theory and application. Duh, that's easy. But, under normal circumstances, I say normal because we're in this COVID environment, but under normal circumstances, these young people, they were going to county meetings. They were going to criminal justice meetings or policy meetings. They were engaged with community members, with formerly incarcerated individuals. So you can't study theory and application if you're not in the community. Duh, you don't need a PhD for that. That's common sense. So for you, brother, what I always say is when you kind of engage, when you're in a class and you feel like, I hate to use the word stale or kind of, mundane or whatever the case, whatever verb or adjective you want to use, as you told, push back, respectfully, of course, but hey, Dr. So-and-so, well, in inner city Baltimore, this is what I see, provide the empirical evidence. How do we address that? How do you help me address that? And see their response. And they should have a response. And if they don't, then that's a problem. Because our job is to prepare y'all to take our job when we retire. And that's the way I see this. I'm passing the torch to my students. And if I don't prepare them, I've done them a disservice, brother. It's real simple. And for me, I take great pride and responsibility in that. And like I said, everyone's not the same. Everybody enters the academy for different purposes. I get that. But for me, my life's work has been to inspire, motivate, and just embolden students to be change agents. And for me, that's all I live for. And for others, their purpose is different. I would just challenge students, graduate or otherwise, to challenge it.
Going back to that the legacy of social change is what we've titled this, right? And I really wanted to ask Crystal, who are some Black women in history that have been a part of that legacy of social change that you think everybody should know about? If you were to tell people 3 names to go find a book, go read something, who would they be?
Henrietta Lacks. Shout out to Henrietta Lacks, who has changed the medical industry. Half the vaccines and research that comes out of that would not be done without the utilization of her cells, HeLa cells. If you don't know what that is, Google it. Johns Hopkins University does a segment on her. She was just finally, after decades, inducted into the Hall of Fame last month. And I grew up in the neighborhood where she grew up, where she's from, Turner Station, Maryland, in Baltimore County. It's the Black waterfront community. But let me tell you why I like Rosa Parks. When Martin stood, she sat. And a lot of people don't understand that sometimes you not being always on the microphone allows you to move in stealth. You don't always have to be, and that's the mindset we have to rethink sometimes. Some of us belong on the microphone because we have the gift of gab, or we're these orders and we can bring, but we also need people in the back. And I think the people that have the ability to say no and to defy in a good way. Because she really showed her power by refusing to take orders. And so sometimes when you look at that, if you look at how we talk about protesting and the trajectory of everything that's going on with Black Lives Matter or what have you, it's more than the protest. What people always ask the question, after you march in the street, what next?
Then what?
Then what? And the third person, Mamie Till. I don't know if you know who that, Emmett Till's mother. I went to the, I don't know who has been to the African American History Museum in Washington, D.C. on this. I've been there. And let me tell you this, just the strength of her. And she did, this is the thing that caused the world to change their perception of how they viewed African American males. When her child was disfigured and beaten and dragged and dismembered, she held an open casket funeral so that the world could see the evil that was taking place in the South. And that, you know, people would say, oh, that's, you know, that's not some grand thing. You let the world, you had an open casket service and she let the whole world come in. But it was televised. And people who would otherwise have remained silent started speaking out from the other side of the aisle. And so the reason why I named those people are because those are what we call the hidden figures. Have y'all remember you saw the movie Hidden Figures where they talk about the women in NASA? And what I started doing, and this is what I want to communicate to people just who are watching this. I want you to start doing research on where you come from. Who are the historical figures in your life? So last Black History Month, or African American History Month, however you want to classify it, instead of highlighting all of the people that we've read about in the textbook, I started doing some digging and talking to the seniors in my family to see who in my family has made history. I also went and looked at the census records that become, you know, public record after a certain amount of time. And I found out that in my line, one of the Tuskegee Airmen, Armour McDaniel, was related to my grandmother, Martha McDaniel. I also found out that, you know, there was history being made in my family. So one of my uncles was the first African-American president of the American Dental Association. That's history, right? So I want to encourage people to do some digging on your own family, your own lineage, because it goes back to remember where you come from and who are you and the why, because you never know, you could have built up. We have a lot of political people in my family, so that probably explains why I like politics, right? But I want to challenge people to go beyond the textbook, because there are people that don't make the front page every February that have made significant contributions to our community. And we can give them a platform by going on Facebook and posting about it, educating our, you know, fellow brothers that Henrietta Lacks is probably the reason why they created chemotherapy and XYZ. So it's really just doing that deep dive beyond the textbook.
Nah, it's powerful though, powerful, man.
Yeah. And you know, one thing that I really want people to take away is when you look at the people in history, try and learn what your history teacher didn't teach you. There's this book, it's called Lies My History Teacher Told Me. If you get a chance, get a copy, read it. But when I think about Rosa Parks, for example, we weren't taught that she was already a longstanding member of the Montgomery chapter of the NAACP, right? We weren't taught that she went down with Martin Luther King Jr. To some of these protests and these boycotts. We were almost taught that it was a one action thing. And for
but you know why though, Isaac? I mean, you know, the reality of it is, you know, the historical, I like to say the historical farce, right, has been the minimalization, excuse me, of our impact in anything US of A, right? Because I mean, every time Black History Month comes about, depending on, you know, what your ideology is, you know, you hear Black history starts when Lincoln freed the slaves. And I'm looking like, really? That's when it started? And that's where it all began. Not before that, not during, not after, not present. Like, it's oftentimes, it's funny to me, because, when I think of certain things, it always brings me back to this quote, James Baldwin, one of my faves. And he says, the paradox of education is precisely this, that as one becomes more conscious, one begins to examine the society in which he is being educated. And I think what we're seeing now globally is that everyone who's been in a bubble, apparently, everyone is starting to realize, oh, snap, wow, maybe these Black folks really weren't embellishing. Like, really? But okay, thank you to social media and the internet and everything. They've magnified it. They magnified what we've been saying for the last, century or so. Every individual person has to kind of come to that point within themselves, right? Some of us have a way of kind of, pulling it out of people and motivating them and all that. But at the end of the day, and Crystal kind of alluded to this, that self-motivation, has to be kind of internal too, because we have been misled historically, sociologically, everything, man. From where we live, we accept that we live in the inner city. And do you not realize that historically, the ghettos in the United States weren't African-American, Latino, or whatever the case may be? They were predominantly immigrant populations, predominantly Irish, Italian, and Jewish. But somehow or another, that gets lost in historical translations. And the ghetto is the worst place to be, and it's predominantly Black folks. And to me, it never ceases to amaze me when I hear those narratives in public.
I really want to ask y'all what connects us. We are all in different spaces right now, right? And the legacy of social change, if it is honoring our past, we know that a big part of honoring our past is staying connected. And so I want to know for you all, what connects us as Black folk? As someone who's Ghanaian, we got someone who's Puerto Rican, Caribbean on a call. We have someone, just different backgrounds, right? But we're all Black. What connects us?
For me, in understanding the history of social change and social movements in our country specifically, what I have found is that for every movement, there's always been a bridging of culture, of ethnicities, of races, belief systems, ideologies, religious ideologies. There's been that bridge, that connection. Oftentimes I will tell folks, you can't move forward if you don't know your history. You can't impact social change if you don't know where you came from. And the came from is metaphor, right? Because you could have been privileged and grew up in a great community, which is a blessing, but you still can appreciate that your ancestors didn't come here privileged. They came here, in chains and bondage, despite what you've heard about, folks from Africa jumping on the ship and coming here because they were going to get jobs. Whoever narrated that, leave that alone. But my point is, in order to impact social change, and as we're looking at, the Black community and leading into Black History Month, what I would challenge, the white audience, or, even some of the Latino audience or the Asian audience or whomever of different religious perspectives, understand and appreciate where you come from, your historical significance. And if there's some things in your history you don't like, then you have the privilege of changing that and setting new, legacies for yourself. And I will finish up on this. There was this actor on a show, and one time they found out that his ancestors had slaves. So apparently he didn't want that information aired because he was incredibly embarrassed by it. And I was like, dude, it's a part of your history. It's a part of your your family's history. What you do now will only reinforce what your ancestors believed in, or you can make social change and be different and impact your community. So for me, I will continue to work tirelessly to help those within my community and others. Because, you know, I don't like bullies, period. So, you know, I don't like the little guy getting the short end of the stick. And yeah, my focus is geared towards my community now, us, but that's not saying that if there's a need elsewhere, I will not engage. I'm about activism. I'm about humanity. You know, I want my sons to be able to flourish years from now in this country of ours without fear of being shot, fear of being ridiculed, fear of this just because of their skin tone. It's ridiculous, you know, but it's a part of this history. So it is our job, it's Crystal's job, it's Isaac's job, it's everybody, it's Walden's job, it's other institutions' job to ensure that we're producing students who are willing to sacrifice and make social change. If not, we will sadly be having this discussion 20 years from now. And I hope and pray we don't.
Black History Month doesn't end with this video. It doesn't end with this conversation. Black history to be honored every day. It is a part of American history. It is a part of the world's history. It's a part of humanity's history. You can't have a story about humanity without Black people. You can't have it without white people, without Asian people, without all people, right?
Yeah, and I think the question that the prior question that was addressed was, you know, what do you tell people who are on the, you know, who are from a different community? And I want to approach it from a different angle here, because, you know, when I'm involved in like the criminal justice field and, you know, equitable policing, and a lot of questions that I hear from people in other communities are, you know, I don't like what's going on, but I don't know what I can do to help. A lot of people, they don't like what they see. They don't know how they can help. And so I want to offer this piece of advice that I'd offered on my Facebook page. I did a little spiel on it. Two things. One, you can use your platform and your voice to just echo what change needs to happen. If you look back in history, you know, from segregation to the Emancipation Proclamation to the Civil Rights era to the Voting Rights era to the Women's Right to Vote era, you know, it wasn't done by one community. It was done by people of all races, of all backgrounds, that had a common understanding that we all are human beings and we all want access to opportunity and the right to live and thrive and be successful. Just banding together to find out what unites us and not divides us, and use your platform to provide a voice for someone else who doesn't have it. And what does that look like? That's standing up to racism in your family if you know that it's happening, and not turning a blind eye and pretending it's not happening. I saw a video it went viral on Facebook, where it was a young Caucasian girl, I think she was like in high school, and her you know, she was out supporting the, you know, the Black Lives Matter protests. And she had recorded her dad didn't realize that she was recording the conversation about, you know, what was going on. And he had said something and she was like, what did you just say? Dad, that's racist, right? I mean, a young girl. But she challenged the ideology and concept and said, well, why do you think that? Why would you say that? And then she broke it down from her understanding of why she thought it was wrong. And the parent didn't realize, well, I wasn't looking at it that way. I wasn't meaning that, but it's racism. So sometimes, even if you're a child, wherever you are in your life, you have a platform and a voice to change the minds of folks, or to get them to see your perspective about something. Use your platform. You don't have to be the president of the United States. It's change starts at the kitchen table. It starts at home, in your backyard, and then it trickles over, because when people know better, they do better. But if you remain silent when you see something wrong happening, it doesn't it's kind of like you're acknowledging or you're okay with what's going on if you don't stand up to it. And then the second thing that I would like to offer is to get involved. No one can make change by yourself. It takes a community to really see change happen. And sometimes change takes a long time. So you have to be willing to have that grit to stay the course. I mean, I always look back and say, what would Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. think now? When we've had our first African-American president. Now we have our first African-American female vice president, who's also of Asian descent. So, use your platform, stay the course, change is hard, and you're not in it by yourself, but you have to use your voice. Use your voice.
I want to thank the both of you so much for being a part of this conversation. I mean, I've been blown away. And my last and final ask is, in my new role as the director of the Center for Social Change, I am adamant about doing the work. And between today, when everybody sees this, right, and this time next year, I would like to have done one project with each of you, whether as an individual or in my role as Walden. I want to commit to that, and I want to know if you all accept that.
That's a no-brainer, man. Of course. I got you.
All right.
Oh, yeah. There's plenty of work out here.
Okay.
That's right.
Yeah. I'm going to hold you to that. I have your email and your cell phone.
Maybe a year from now, we'll have a story to tell about the service we did and the bridges we built. So thank you both. And thank you to everybody that's been a part of this for the Black History Lives Here series. Thank you so much. These past 4 weeks have been amazing. But it's what you all do with these lessons and stories that will really honor Black history. It's how you share this, what you learn, and how you actually do the work that needs to be done. So thank you very much to everybody. And let's get ready to celebrate Women's History Month. So I'm thinking about the conversation we had with Jack and Crystal and how to honor all the conversations that came before and how important it is to honor the conversations that should follow. And I'm thinking about Women's History Month, and I'm thinking about all the other cultural months that are to come. There's so many, you all know. And the best way to honor that is to honor the intersectionality that exists in all of those cultural months to come. And I know that Women's History Month is coming up. And so I thought there's so many ways to go about having a Q&A, to invite you all to send some questions in and ask, Jack and Crystal. But then I thought, well, why don't I invite the amazing ladies that have been a part of these conversations? And so tonight I have the pleasure to really give up this platform, right? I've interviewed and I've done all these, and it's time for me to give up this platform to 4 amazing people, not only in our Walden community, but in this world. I get the opportunity to invite them up to really moderate their own discussion with the questions you all send in. And so allow me to just briefly introduce everyone. Tiffany Solarin is our Alumni Chapters Manager. Carla Chase is our Student Communications Manager. Dr. Rochelle Gilbert is our Dean of Student Affairs. And as you all know, Dr. Crystal Francis, she's a program analyst at Social Security Administration. And I mean, I'm going to step away. This is their conversation. This is their show now. And I want to hear from you all about what it means to not only be Black, but be a woman, right? In this world, in this country, in this society that we live in. And we'll send you all some of the questions that people send in the chat. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Isaac. What an amazing and powerful talk that we just had. I would like to say, hey, kudos to you and Drs. Francis and Monell for imparting such proverbial words of knowledge on the Walden community. When I think about everything that was said here tonight, all I can think about is the growth that we're going to have within this community. In addition to that, I would just have to say that this series, this experience has been awesome. It's been great. I know that from what I've heard from others when they've talked about all of the videos that have been shown. But when we think about Black History Lives Here and the dialogue beyond the camera's lenses, that's what the ladies are going to chat about tonight. So it's an honor to sit at the table tonight with all of these queens. Yes, I said queens. I see those invisible crowns over there. Because when I see or I talk to any of you, I often, just start the conversation as, hey, queen, because I like to acknowledge that you all are queens in your own light. We're leaders. We're women of valor. We are crown wearers. But you know what, ladies? That crown wearing is not an easy job. Sometimes that crown falls off. Sometimes that crown gets crooked. Sometimes that thing gets heavy. So first, thank you for those times that you've straightened those crowns for another woman. Thank you for the time you've held out a hand to help carry when it's falling off. And I say, I thank you for that, because when we think about crowns, we think about the many hats that we as women wear. So one core question comes to mind before we start taking questions from the audience, and particularly listening to you, Crystal. What is the most challenging aspect of being an African-American woman today?
Well, I think the most challenging aspect of being an African-American woman today is that the expectation that you have to carry the load, like you talked about, we have crowns, but we wear many hats. Oftentimes, we may be the breadwinner in our family. Maybe we are the matriarch. Maybe we're responsible for taking care of, our siblings. But then outside of that, we have an obligation and responsibility to show up in our communities. So oftentimes when I see hardworking Black women in the community, they are not just at the table holding up the family that they came from, but they're out in the streets, in the communities, in these organizations, trying to build up other people's families. So the obligation for us to not only lead, but to take charge is what I think comes to mind for me.
Absolutely, Crystal. I just to echo that and piggyback, first of all, thank you for such a great discussion. That was awesome tonight. And I think for me, Dr. Rowe, I think one of the challenges I see is that in the midst of everything that Crystal just mentioned, and you mentioned wearing the hats, we're in the communities, we're at home, we're in the churches, is to forget that the self-care piece, because in the midst of taking care of our jobs and our church and our communities and the families and the families, we forget often to take care of ourselves. And I think that's a big challenge that African-American women face daily. And it's one that we're definitely seeing some strides there, but it's one that no matter how high you climb, you absolutely cannot forget to take care of yourself.
And I just want to add on to that, Carla, being okay with just existing. Just taking care of yourself, just being there without wearing all of the hats and wearing the hats, but just being a beautiful Black woman, just existing in your skin and your divinity and in your royalty. So I think sometimes we feel guilty for just relaxing because, like you said, we wear so many hats. So it's like, oh, I should be doing X, Y, and Z. So just that self-care, as you mentioned, Carla, and just saying, you know what? I deserve this piece. I deserve to do X, Y, and Z, and that's okay. I'm just going to be a queen today, wear my crown, and maybe call on Dr. Rowe and see how she's doing.
That's right. That's right. Thank you, Tiffany. I think that's a key takeaway. We as women have to do more of that. We have to call on one another just to check in. Hey, girl, no other reason, not want anything, but to actually check in on one another, have that dialogue, and then ask, how are you doing today? Because a lot of times we don't ask that question. We assume because we're strong Black women that everything's okay. But I may need that word of encouragement today, or I may need to give you that word of encouragement. And so in that vein, I think it's really, really important that we have that I am spirit. I talk about it all the time. Be intentional, be authentic, and just be me, be yourself. Doesn't matter who else comes in front. You just have to always step in motion of making that journey towards who you are. Oh my God, I can already tell that the questions are coming in. We're so excited. So one person said that each of you have kind of unveiled your compelling stories about your experiences. And I know it was amazing for me to watch those experiences, but maybe can you share how you would describe navigating gender and race in the world today?
Well, I'll take a stab at that question. I think it goes back to what Tiffany just said. You have to be you. I know oftentimes in the field that I am in, it is dominated by white males. The criminal justice arena is a male-dominated society, and oftentimes when you are the only person that looks like you in the room, it can be intimidating. But I think we have to always remember the fact that you are in the room should give you enough confidence to, number one, let you know you deserve to be there and that you have something to contribute and offer. The same thing for now our LGBTQ community. A lot of the challenges that I hear, especially as it relates to the transgender society, is that they're often discriminated because of how they show up. And I think that once we get in our own mind to just be ourselves, be true to who you are. It shouldn't matter what other people think. You know who you are. Show up, impart that knowledge, and understand that you deserve to be there.
Absolutely. I'll take this too, Ro. And it's just, having that authentic conversation with yourself, before you leave the house, before you greet the world, being prepared to show up into the world as yourself and being comfortable in your own skin, owning the moment that you're in. I think for a lot of us, we are often taught to kind of be seen and not heard. And so the shrink word comes into play, where we're just kind of shrinking within ourselves. And I've seen women do it, whether it's the way that they dress, the way that they carry themselves. Oh, I don't want to draw too much attention. And we're just fabulous. And we need to show up in that way every day. But I think, again, it's a part of, taking that moment for yourself before you leave the house. If it's that pep talk, if it's telling you, you know what, I'm going to greet this world and be a part of these conversations with men, with women, with whomever, and showing up to say, here, I'm here and I'm ready to do my part.
And that
Carla,
means sometimes you have to throw out that song, that one song that gets you ready in the morning. You play it as you get dressed, you play it as you're going through the world, and you just make it happen. So Tiffany, just really quickly, I know you're about to share, but when I thought about what you said, I thought about a quote from the book Becoming. And in that book, Michelle Obama basically says that becoming is not about arriving somewhere or achieving a certain thing, but it's forward motion. It's evolving. It's a way to reach continuously toward that better self. Can you talk a little bit about that?
oh yes. Just to touch base on what Carla said, because Carla, you did it for me. I would say we have to practice rechanging the narrative. I was reading an article earlier that said, stop telling women they're suffering from imposter syndrome. We have to be mindful of the stories that we tell ourselves. So for me, as you said, I play my Beyonce, okay, every morning. All right, I have a pump up song, I get it going, and I know I show up as who I am. And I'm also unafraid to explain to people who I am. I am me, I show up as me, and I prepare people for me. My energy is, this is how I say my energy is. It's exciting, it's in your face, it's bold, and sometimes you have to prepare people mentally. But as far as what you said is forward moving, I tell myself what my future is. I plan what it's going to be because I am those things. They're just coming to me. So because I know my worth, as Carla was mentioning earlier, I know my worth. Everything that I want is coming to me. So now I've changed my mindset to stop thinking, oh, I won't be able to achieve X, Y, and Z because of my race or because of my color or because of my gender. Now I'm coming after everything that's for me because it's already here.
It's yours. It belongs to you, and you are definitely becoming. Ladies, I love these responses, and I want to talk a little bit now from the audience's perspective about glass ceilings and even glass cliffs. The question here is, how do you navigate trying to crack the glass ceiling in your respective fields? But before we answer that question, I want to speak to glass cliffs. We don't talk about that. And that glass cliff is kind of that conceptualized thought of, if we put this woman in this position, that we already know the males, the other people have failed in this role. We're going to put you there because we know everyone else has failed. So at the end of the day, we can say we gave you an opportunity. And so that glass cliff syndrome is this, to push you over the cliff. But we have to take that power back and remind them that we can do all things. We can do everything, no matter what comes up against us. There is no challenge. It's an opportunity. So how can you navigate cracking the glass ceiling when you know there's a glass cliff out there?
Listen, there is, and right, we can do all things, but from the day to day, I can't do anything without my girls, my support system, my network, who I know that no matter what happens to me, they always have my back. And having that kind of confidence lets me walk into the workplace with a feeling of, you know what, I got this. And no matter what happens, if I fall, if I stumble, there is my support system that's going to support me and kind of, love on me when I need it most. And so I think the whole idea of breaking the glass ceiling, it's not going to be a shatter. It's going to be just little chips along the way. There were women before me who've made some cracks, and I'm making my own little steady cracks. And I know that by the time my daughter gets there, there'll be even more cracks to shatter. And so again, it's the whole idea of not trying to take on the world, but doing my part within my industry to make sure that there are 100 more cracks in that thing by the time I left it, so that those who are coming behind me can go just a little bit further than I did.
Yeah, and I think Carla just made a great point there. She said that other people came before her and they put little cracks in. And the key to that is you have to put your name in the hat. When you see a job that comes across, when you see an opportunity that comes across and you know you're qualified, put your name in the hat. Never let anyone take the opportunity from you because you didn't put yourself in the selecting pool. And so one thing that I also want to address, because it's been studied by human resource professionals, is that 70% of women don't put in for a leadership position because someone did not ask them to. We have to stop waiting for permission to be asked to take what we are already qualified to do. Put your name in the hat.
I like that.
And not only put your name in the hat, once your name goes in the hat, secure the seat.
Secure the seat. Love it.
Talk about a seat at the table, but you have to secure that seat. So when you walk into the room, you already know that you belong, but you have to prepare yourself, whatever that takes, whether it's studying, connecting with someone else in that field that may be the leader in that field, reading. We have to make sure that we continue to stay abreast of current trends. We can't talk about what all used to happen in the past overall. We have to talk about the past, the future, and the present of what we're doing right now to get prepared to secure that seat.
Absolutely. And we're witnessing it on the national stage every day. We're watching women who are, lifting as they climb. I mean, Stacey Abrams is the epitome of that, who, someone who lost an election and could have gone home and sulked. But what did she do? She went and rewrote the narrative. Like we said earlier, she came back and she kept climbing, and then she was lifting the community as she climbed and just lifted us up into this current state that we're in. But I think it's incumbent upon us, and it doesn't have to be a Stacey Abrams. It could be the cafeteria worker. It could be the mid-level manager. It could be the C-suite executive director. Lifting as we climb has to be our mantra, and it has to be how we envision how we're going to move our communities forward.
Oh, yes. I just want to add on one quick thing. Carla, you talked about the network. Dr. Francis, you talked about putting your name in the hat, but then also once you put your name in the hat, you're sitting at the table, you show up and you show out as your authentic self. Even though you may have been put there for a particular situation, it's your sauce that's different than everybody else. So you got to show up and show out. So you have to be more intentional about the relationships that you're building and how you're reworking and rephrasing these relationships, because we're doing it different. No one ever did it like we did it. And then also making sure we keep the door open for our next sister, our next friend, or whoever else to come through that door, and make sure that they have the things in place for them to be successful.
Absolutely, Tiffany. We cannot be comfortable being the only one, be it woman, be it, like you said, LGBTQ, we cannot be comfortable being the only one. You look around that table, and if you're the only one, then you have some work to do.
Yes, and I think mentorship plays a large part in that. I have always served as a mentor at my job, and it really doesn't matter what level you are at. You could be a first line supervisor, you could be a regular contributor to the mission of the organization. But I think as you progress, like she was saying, you lift while you climb. A part of that lifting and pulling someone else up is that mentorship piece. So I want to encourage all of our leaders who are out there to just grab the hand of somebody else who you know is aspiring to be where you are, and guide them, share your experiences so they don't make the same mistakes you did when you were trying to break that glass ceiling or climb that glass cliff.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Absolutely, ladies. And Tiffany, you know that I'm from Louisiana. So when you started talking about that sauce, I thought about your Beyonce with that hot sauce in my bag swag. And we have to have a little flavor out there. But time flies when you're having fun. And this discussion has been so great. Maybe we need a few more of these that are a little bit longer. So with that, I do have one last question that we want each of you to answer. And so we'll start with Tiffany, and then Crystal and Carla, if you could also answer this question. But what one nugget of wisdom would you like to leave with our audience tonight?
I would say be intentional about how you show up and how you help other people, and just really understanding who you are. I would say that in my experience, really learning who I am, accepting my personality, accepting how I show up for myself and in the workplace is very important. And understanding how my energy relates to other people, it's now made me more of a better person. So I understand myself. So I show up in my authenticity, and I encourage you to do the same no matter who you are, because it's like I said, it's the sauce, okay? People try to replicate it. It's different, all right? And people pay for the sauce, okay?
Love it. Love it. I would say, Dr. Rowe, never stop learning. I think, right, once we are prayed up and played up, and once we have our spiritual armor on us and we're ready to face the world and our name is in the hat and we have our sauce and we're walking in the room, you have to know your craft. And so their professional development is at the top of my list. It's something I'm always looking into. And I would say for those of you out there who are looking for ways to improve yourself, never stop learning. It's incumbent upon success in any industry.
Yes, and my nugget of advice would be invest in yourself. A lot of times we're out here investing in other people. Don't forget to invest in yourself, in your dreams, and take a risk on your own success.
Ladies, I have to say, I'll leave one too. Now more than ever, we have an opportunity to step up with the spirit of fortitude, to continue to create sustainable change. That's that never-ending change, that change that's going to grow us and help us to glow in the workplace. But whenever an opportunity arises, we must have the can-do-it attitude. But ask yourselves, what does this require from me to get it done? And just do it. Stop questioning yourself. Just keep going. Just do what you know to do, and that's be yourself. So ladies, thank you each for sharing your stories tonight. And to our audience, we thank you for being here. Straighten those crowns, ladies, because you wear them well, and there's still more story to tell. Absolutely. Back to Isaac.
Thank you so much for that. To you, I mean, just wonderful human beings, really. I can't stress it enough. These past 4 weeks have been probably the most growth I've had at Walden University. And you all are a fundamental part of that. And I'm so grateful for that. Now, I know there's people in the audience watching this right now who are going to say, well, what about Women's History Month? What about Veterans Month? What about Native American Month? What about, there's so many months, right? We're going to try and honor all of them. We are going to try, and because I think we all understand that the world is hurting, and to perform an equitable biopsy, to perform an actual test to see what's wrong, we have to listen to the people that are being hurt the most. And we have to honor those voices and listen to them. There are no oppressed people that are silent. You just have to tune your ears to the channel that they're on. And so that is my commitment, to try my best to help highlight those stories and honor them. So please stay tuned, stay connected. Please keep watching all of our platforms and know that we have way more in store for all the other months and all the other people we have to honor. So thank you so much for joining us, and let's get ready for Women's History Month.